picture a woman living in a hotel room at the Beverly Wilshire in Los Angeles. The year is 1979.
Right.
She's in her late 60s, physically frail and, essentially bedridden at this point.
She's completely isolated.
Exactly. And according to several biographers, her bank account has dwindled down to merely a few $1,000s. She is spending her final days quietly, just systematically liquidating whatever minor assets she has left, just to cover her day-to-day survival.
That's a stark image.
It is. Now hold that image in your mind and contrast it with this. This exact same woman once possessed a personal fortune that, if you adjust it for inflation today, hovered near $1 billion.
$1 billion with a B.
With a B. She
Yeah.
wore elaborate historical jewelry that had literally been draped around the neck of Marie Antoinette. She had been married to a legendary Hollywood icon, to real-life princes, and to, European counts.
The disparity between those two realities it's almost difficult to process. You are looking at the absolute pinnacle of global wealth, prestige, glamour, and it's all slowly collapsing into a very quiet, deeply isolated end.
Yeah.
If you submitted this as a Hollywood script, it would be rejected for being too unbelievable.
It really would. But it's entirely factual. Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are looking at the life of Barbara Woolworth Hutton.
A woman who the global press notoriously dubbed the poor little rich girl.
Right, that awful nickname. Our mission today is to step way past those sensational tabloid headlines. Using the extensive biographical accounts you shared with us, we are going to examine the deeply human, often tragic, and frankly, incredibly compelling narrative of her life.
Because there's so much more there than just the money.
Oh, absolutely. We want to look at the mechanics of her wealth, the psychology of her isolation, and how someone with virtually unlimited resources ends up with almost nothing.
Because when you strip away the spectacular numbers and the estates and all those bought and paid for royal titles, you are left with a very raw exploration of the search for connection.
Mm-hmm.
We often assume wealth provides this impenetrable shield against the world. But this story demonstrates how extreme fortune can actually operate as a powerful magnet for exploitation.
Okay, let's unpack this by starting at the very beginning, because her origins really lay the architectural groundwork for every single thing that follows. Barbara was born in 1912, right at the intersection of two massive American empires.
Two colossal families.
Exactly. She was the granddaughter of Frank W. Woolworth, the tycoon who founded the wildly successful Woolworth five-and-dime retail empire. And her father, Franklin Laws Hutton, was a highly successful co-founder of the respected investment banking firm E.F. Hutton.
So she was essentially born into American royalty.
Yes, she was.
But that immense financial security was almost immediately obliterated by catastrophic emotional trauma.
Right. In 1917, when Barbara was just 4 years old, her mother, Edna, died suddenly in a suite at the Plaza Hotel.
Which was just shocking for high society.
Utterly shocking. The official cause of death was listed as suffocation related to a condition called mastoiditis. Now, looking at the medical reality of the time, mastoiditis is a severe bacterial infection of the mastoid bone behind the ear.
And this is pre-antibiotics, right?
Exactly. Before the advent of antibiotics, it was incredibly dangerous and could easily spread to the brain or cause fatal sepsis. But, the official story doesn't fully line with the whispers that haunted the family for decades.
No, it doesn't. The rumors were that it wasn't a bacterial infection at all, but rather a suicide driven by despair over her husband's rampant infidelities.
Wow.
And the mechanism that allowed those rumors to flourish is fascinating. The coroner at the time decided that no autopsy was necessary.
Wait, really? Just skipped it?
Just skipped it. You have to ask yourself, how does a coroner just skip an autopsy on an otherwise healthy, wealthy woman who dies suddenly in a hotel? Exactly. It speaks volumes about the societal frameworks of the Gilded Age. Extreme wealth could essentially buy silence. It could purchase the suppression of public scandal just to protect a family's brand.
And the most devastating detail of this entire event, it was 4-year-old Barbara who wandered into the room and discovered her mother's body.
What's fascinating here is how this early, profound lack of secure parental attachment established a deeply damaged psychological baseline.
How could it not?
Right. A trauma of that magnitude requires intense psychological scaffolding to heal.
Hmm.
But rather than being enveloped in care, she was essentially discarded by her grieving, neglectful father.
Yeah, she was just passed around to various relatives. She was raised by this rotating cast of governesses sent to elite private schools where she remained intensely introverted.
She was totally isolated.
Her only real confidant was a cousin, Jimmy Donahue, who he was dealing with his own severe psychological troubles. So you have this scenario where she is being utterly starved of affection, but simultaneously her bank account is just gorging.
Right, the trusts are maturing.
Exactly. By her 21st birthday in 1933, her father, who had been legally managing her trusts, had grown her inheritance to $42 million.
Just an astronomical figure back then.
And plus, she received another $8 million from her mother's estate. In today's money, you're looking at a staggering sum. It's like being handed the keys to a spectacular, sprawling castle, only to find out you've been locked all alone inside the dungeon.
Oh, that is the perfect way to visualize her reality. She had no model for genuine, unconditional love. Wealth became her primary lens for understanding the world, and unfortunately, her only tool for attempting to acquire affection.
That's all she knew.
Right. When you have unlimited resources but zero emotional grounding, you become incredibly vulnerable.
Which brings us to the moment that vulnerability collides violently with public life. It's 1930, Barbara turns 18, and it's time for her debutante ball. We need to set the historical stage here, though.
Yeah, the timing is critical.
This is the very beginning of the Great Depression. The American economy is in free fall, people are standing in soup lines, unemployment is skyrocketing. And in the midst of this national agony, her family throws her a lavish party at the Ritz-Carlton that costs roughly $60,000.
Which translates to millions today.
Millions. They decorated the ballroom with real silver birch trees, imported thousands of roses, and hired massive stars like Maurice Chevalier to perform.
The public relations mechanics of this decision were disastrous. The press just pounced.
Oh, they tore her apart.
They really did. It wasn't just that she was wealthy. I mean, there were other wealthy families like the Astors and Rockefellers. But the sheer tone-deaf ostentation of this specific event turned Barbara into a symbol of everything wrong with American capitalism.
Right.
The public backlash was so venomous that her family actually sent her on a tour of Europe just to escape the media onslaught.
See, you'd think that kind of public burn would make her retreat and fiercely protect her assets, but instead it pushed her into an arena where she was even more exposed. She enters the world of exiled European aristocracy.
Oh boy.
And this is where we see the first of what I can only describe as like aristocratic corporate raiders looking for a hostile takeover of her American capital.
That is a highly accurate analytical framework. Her first marriage in 1933 to Alexis McDivany was essentially a targeted acquisition.
Yeah.
Alexis and his siblings were part of an exiled Georgian nobility who fled the Soviet invasion. They styled themselves as, princes and princesses, but their primary occupation was social climbing and financial survival.
And the mechanics of how he actually secured the marriage are terrifying. Alexis's sister, Rousey, was the mastermind. Alexis was actually already married to one of Barbara's friends.
Right, which makes it even worse.
Totally. But Rousey engineered this scenario in San Sebastian, Spain, where she meticulously timed witnesses to walk in and catch Alexis in the act of seducing Barbara in a hotel room.
It was extortion masquerading as courtship.
Exactly.
They weaponized the social mechanics of the 1930s against her. At that time, a woman's reputation was her most vital social currency. Rousey threatened Barbara with a massive, ruinous public scandal if she didn't marry her brother.
And considering Barbara was already traumatized by the brutal press coverage of her debutante ball, the threat of another global scandal was paralyzing.
She was trapped.
She was. She surrendered. They were married, her father provided a $1 million dowry, and Alexis immediately began liquidating her assets, buying strings of polo ponies, custom Rolls Royces, and custom clothes.
The marriage was purely transactional on his end. They divorced less than 2 years later, but the psychological damage was compounding. She had learned that her wealth made her a target, yet she still desperately craved the protection that a powerful husband theoretically offered.
Which leads directly into marriage number 2 in 1935 to a Danish count named Kurt Hogwitz-Reventlow.
This one is dark.
Yeah. If the first marriage was a hostile financial takeover, this one escalated into a violent, systemic dismantling of her autonomy. He utilized severe physical and verbal abuse, beating her so savagely on one occasion that she actually ended up in the hospital and he ended up in jail.
And beyond the physical violence, we have to look at the legal and financial coercion he employed. He successfully pressured her into renouncing her American citizenship to take his Danish citizenship.
Okay, wait, explain the mechanics of that, because that wasn't just a romantic gesture.
No, not at all. It was entirely about cross-border wealth control. The United States taxes its citizens on their global income, regardless of where they live from.
Right.
By forcing her to drop her U.S. citizenship, the Count was attempting to shield her immense wealth from American tax authorities, maneuvering her assets into European legal frameworks where he had significantly more authoritarian control over her finances as her husband.
Wow.
It was a calculated move to isolate her legally, geographically, and financially.
That is horrifying. And it was during this specific nightmare that her physical health began to permanently deteriorate. She developed a severe substance abuse problem to cope with the reality of her life, and it triggered the onset of anorexia nervosa, which she would battle for the rest of her days.
It's just tragic.
They did have one child together, a son named Lance, but the divorce was incredibly bitter and featured an ugly, protracted custody dispute.
Okay, I have to push back here, though, because looking at this from a modern perspective, it's really hard to wrap my head around.
Sure.
With $40 million in the bank, why couldn't she just buy her way out of these toxic situations the minute they started? She could afford the best lawyers on earth.
It is a natural question, but it fundamentally misunderstands how abuse operates. You're assuming that wealth equals emotional armor.
I guess I am, yeah.
The psychological paralysis of systemic abuse is profound. Wealth doesn't insulate someone from manipulation, especially someone whose entire developmental childhood taught them they were inherently unlovable and unworthy of protection.
That makes sense. When an abuser targets your core foundational insecurities, the money just becomes another weapon they use to isolate you. It forces a broader reflection. I would ask you, listening to this deep dive right now, what stands out to you about how society views the wealth of women versus their actual agency?
Wow.
We constantly assume that capital makes a person powerful, but in cases like this, it merely illuminates them as a high-value target.
That is a deeply unsettling realization, but the sheer trauma of that second marriage, combined with the geopolitical reality of World War II looming over Europe, finally forced a thematic pivot in her life.
Yes, a big shift.
She escaped the Count, moved back toward the United States and the UK, and we start to see these surprising, genuine glimmers of independence.
We do. Before the outbreak of the war, she had overseen the construction of a massive, opulent estate in London called Winfield House. But when the war started, rather than just retreating to safety and hoarding her wealth, she engaged in highly active philanthropy.
The scale of her giving during this period is remarkable. She donated her personal yacht to the Royal Navy for military use. She funneled substantial funds to the Free French forces.
She was really stepping up.
She even started leveraging her previously toxic high-profile image to sell war bonds across the United States. She was actively using the mechanics of public relations to finally repair her relationship with the American public. And it was during this era of relative stability in Hollywood that she meets husband number 3.
In 1942, she married Cary Grant, who was, at that moment, one of the biggest, most bankable movie stars on the planet.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the press, operating on their established narrative, was incredibly cynical about the pairing. They instantly slapped them with the nickname Cash and Cary.
So cruel.
The underlying assumption was that he was just another social arbitrager looking to tap into the Woolworth fortune. But looking at the actual mechanics of their relationship, the reality was entirely inverted.
It was. Cary Grant was a self-made millionaire. He had fought his way up from absolute poverty in England to the top of the Hollywood studio system. He didn't need a single dime of her money, and he certainly didn't need her fame.
Right.
He genuinely cared for the woman beneath the fortune. There's a brilliant historical anecdote where the famous broadcaster Edward R. Murrow was leveling some fairly unfounded criticism at Barbara, accusing her of abandoning her London home during the war.
Okay.
Grant didn't let her PR team handle it. He stepped right up, confronted the narrative, and suggested Murrow actually visit Winfield House to see its wartime use before attacking his wife.
He defended her publicly. He acted as a real protective partner, but tragically, the internal damage she carried was just too profound. The marriage didn't last, and they divorced in 1945. And just to completely obliterate the cynics, Grant didn't seek nor did he accept a single cent in the divorce settlement.
The irony of that relationship is staggering. Her one truly non-exploitative protective marriage was to a Hollywood actor, a man whose entire profession was built on the mechanics of make-believe.
Yeah, wow.
Yet he provided the most real, grounded, authentic relationship she ever experienced.
But the failure of that marriage seemed to sever her final, fragile tether to reality. After Grant, it's as if she internalized the idea that she could never be loved for who she was, and she started frantically searching for an identity by imposing her will on her environment. She began acquiring things and titles.
The transition here is stark. The latter half of her life becomes this dizzying, almost frantic spectacle of rapid-fire marriages and extreme, unchecked consumption. It is the psychology of accumulation acting as a desperate substitute for human connection.
Let's examine the sheer scale and the types of men she pursued. Marriage number 4 in 1947 was to Igor Trubetskoy, a Russian prince who also happened to be the first man to drive a Ferrari in Grand Prix racing.
Quite the resume.
Right. When that marriage fractured and he filed for divorce, she made global headlines with a suicide attempt. She survives and moves on to marriage number 5 in 1953. Porfirio Rubirosa, a notorious Dominican diplomat and legendary playboy.
And that specific union lasted exactly 53 days.
53 days.
He was openly continuing a highly publicized affair with the actress Zsa Gabor the entire time.
The visual details of that wedding are almost cinematic in their tragedy. A journalist covering the event noted that the bride, for her 5th wedding, showed up wearing a black dress and carried a scotch and soda throughout the entire ceremony.
It's a stunning manifestation of her internal state.
It really is. Then came marriage 6 to a German tennis star, Baron Gottfried von Kram. And finally, marriage 7 to a man named Raymond Doan. And this one is the ultimate distillation of her mindset. She literally purchased a title for him from a former royal family in Laos, just so she could be addressed as a princess.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you are witnessing a tragic, highly capitalized attempt to purchase a stable identity.
Absolutely.
She is buying royal titles and surrounding herself with historical permanence because she has absolutely no internal permanence or sense of self.
And it wasn't just titles she was buying, it was history itself. The mechanics of her collecting are fascinating. She amassed museum-quality collections of old master paintings and rare porcelain.
Incredible stuff.
She acquired elaborate historical jewelry, including pieces that had belonged to Empress Eugenie of France, alongside breathtaking items by Fabergé and Cartier. She even built a massive 30-acre Japanese-style palace in Cuernavaca, Mexico, completely dictating every environmental detail.
The jewelry collection, specifically, offers a profound psychological insight. She acquired a flawless, globally renowned 40-carat diamond known as the Pasha.
Oh, the story.
It was an octagonal cut, which is historically significant. But Barbara didn't like the shape, so she paid master jewelers to grind this priceless stone down to 36 carats simply because she preferred a round, brilliant cut.
Just ground it away.
Think about the psychology of that action. She's literally chipping away at a priceless, indestructible object just to force it to fit her idealized, controllable vision. It is the ultimate exercise of power over an object when you have zero power over your own internal emotional state.
That is such a vivid way to understand her mindset. Relentless accumulation and control over the inanimate, just to mask the chaos of her personal life. But eventually, the operating costs of that chaos catch up.
They always do.
The mask slips, and the final toll on her life is marked by unimaginable loss.
The architecture of her survival finally collapsed in 1972. Her only child, Lance Reventlow, who had grown up to become a successful race car driver and automotive builder, died tragically in a plane crash.
Lance was really her only remaining anchor to the world. When he died, whatever fragile spirit was keeping her moving forward just fundamentally broke. And as her spirit broke, the seemingly bottomless well of her fortune began to rapidly evaporate.
People often wonder how a billion-dollar fortune just disappears.
Right, how is that even possible?
It's a combination of extreme illiquidity, massive operating costs, and predatory management. She was maintaining multiple global palaces with enormous staffs. But she also engaged in extreme, almost pathological generosity to total strangers, buying luxury cars or high-end jewels for anyone who just showed her a momentary flicker of attention.
Plus, there were severe allegations that her longtime lawyer was exploiting her declining state, making highly questionable financial deals that systematically ate away at the principal of the estate.
There was no oversight.
None at all. No one protecting her interests because she had isolated herself from anyone who might have cared.
Even her most valuable real estate was gone. She had generously donated Winfield House to the U.S. government years earlier to serve as an ambassador's residence. The assets were drained, the sycophants vanished when the cash flow stopped, and the well finally ran completely dry.
Which brings us full circle, back to where we started. The Beverly Wilshire Hotel in Los Angeles. She was living out her final days practically bedridden, liquidating her very last assets, minor pieces of jewelry, personal items just to pay the daily hotel bill and survive.
Heartbreaking.
In May of 1979, at the age of 66, she suffered a fatal heart attack. And while historians debate the exact accounting of her final days, multiple biographers note she may have died with as little as $3,500 to her name. So what does this all mean? How do we synthesize this massive trajectory from the very heights of global aristocracy to a lonely hotel room?
I believe her life serves as one of the most profound historical counter-narratives to the American dream that we have on record.
Tell me more about that.
The fundamental promise of the American dream is that the accumulation of wealth and status inevitably leads to security, autonomy, and happiness. Barbara Hutton had the absolute maximum amount of capital a human being could theoretically possess. But because of her unhealed foundational trauma and the predatory societal framework she was thrust into, she was perpetually devastatingly bankrupt when it came to genuine human connection.
She spent an entire lifetime trying to purchase the unconditional love she was denied as a child, only to find out that the people selling it to her were just taking her change.
Exactly.
Looking at the mechanics of her life really forces you to reconsider the ease of tabloid judgment. Behind every poor little rich girl headline was a woman who survived unimaginable early abuse, desperately tried to find her footing in a world of corporate raiders and exploiters, and was ultimately consumed by the massive machinery of her own fortune.
It is a harrowing story, but it's a vital case study on the extreme limitations of capital. Money can alter your environment, but it cannot rewire your psychology.
I want to leave you, our listener, with a lingering thought to mull over today. Try to imagine an alternate history. If Barbara Hutton had never inherited a single dime of that sprawling Woolworth fortune,
A totally different life.
right, if she had just been forced to make her own way in the world, completely unburdened by the massive target that her money painted on her back with a poor little rich girl, have actually ended up living a much richer, much more fulfilling life. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the mechanics behind the historical headlines.